My name is Damien Worth, and I'm a multi-disciplinary artist based in Belfast, Prince Edward Island. I guess the best way to begin talking about my art practice is to talk about world building. I tend to make landscape-based work that lies just outside our collective knowledge of locations. I aim to straddle a line between reality and fiction, borderlands that exist between worlds, and a relationship with the invisible. I have a lot of approaches and work with a lot of different media. I tend to avoid a style of making. I don't want to stay in one place too long. I think that keeps things fresh and fluid and tends to mesh well with my vision of spaces that are elusive or disjointed. When I was in art school, I was making what I then called landscapes in crisis. They were usually surreal, accident-prone, built spaces that depicted terrains in revolt. I think I wanted to give landscape agency. It usually resulted in a narrative that presented moments of upheaval. I was making ambiguous occurrences where you couldn't tell if something was just about to happen or whether it just did. Either way, though, you knew something was traumatic was going to happen. I used collage to put people into these spaces. The characters were usually distracted by their own dilemmas and oblivious to the world crashing around them. I was also making some video and installation work at the time, but I don't think that was very successful. But it did lead me to using video game building software called Unity. And full disclosure, I don't really play or like video games. But I like the potential for building navigatable spaces assembled from a curated set of images. I used Unity to make surreal worlds built out of images of my paintings to begin with. I like that you could be walking across the surface of a painting, crash through it, or bounce from piece to piece. It provided an alternative visual perspective on engaging with painting. I was also interested in using Unity as an alternative gallery space. My use with Unity evolved into projects that I'm continuing today. I'm making portraits of cities using images that are donated from the public, and I take on more of a role of a composer. I like the idea of creating a dialogue in these interactive spaces by using a bunch of site-based images gleaned from the public. I think that has the potential to be a path to bigger conversations about access to information, land stewardship, and ownership. Part of the aim of my practice is to talk about landscape in broader terms. I wanted to ask questions about not only ecological or physical spaces, but also social, economic landscapes, political spaces, and media landscapes as well. I think it comes down to using landscape as a metaphor for information. What does it present itself to be? How do we navigate it? And how do we arrive at some sort of common ground, if at all? After NASCAD, I was still and am still making work about dislocation. But now they're more rooted in the idea of thresholds, tension release, and location identity. I'm making places that are just out of reach, borderland between the wild and the tamed, fringe space that are loaded with visual abnormalities. I think it's important to have a tension between representation and abstraction, control release. My process is pretty dependent on accidents like spills, stains, drips, erasure, and I tend to overpaint my paintings a lot. I really know a work is going to be successful if I get lost halfway through. I guess that's about navigation and destination too. How do you find your way through a work? There's lots of bushwhacking to do to find a resting point that still leaves me wanting more. I'm thinking a lot about memory too. Our expectations of returning to spaces from our past and how our experiences define our relationship to a site. I want my work to live in the in-between. I'm looking for some disrupted and mysterious presence of place that is elusive. But, it still lures me in. Thinking about what's over that next hill, what's hidden within that stand of trees, and what's happening just over there.